American transit planning has reached a turning point in recent years. The pandemic killed the traditional 9-to-5 commuter model, with ridership having cratered in the years following.
This, combined with the need to move our society off of fossil fuels, or to be more precise, cars, has resulted in transit systems evolving.
However, as a glimmer of hope, we can find guidance in a singular line in the CTA system.
Which one?
Well, let's look. No, too old. No, too busy. No, too young. Perfect.
At last.
The Skokie Swift, also known as the Yellow Line, is an oddball transit line, a goofy little 3-station line that serves the suburbs of Chicago and which the CTA recently, as in a year ago, speed limited to 35 miles per hour.
How could this train be relevant to anything?
Well, the history of the Skokie Swift tells us where transit planning has been in the crisis before and how it has changed itself to better suit the times.
In the 1910s, the city of Chicago was growing at a massive rate. Immigration, the expansion of factory labor, and new railroads meant that Chicago had become one of the country's biggest cities and showed no sign of slowing down.
Line go up!
In this time, the system of elevated rail lines, or if you're short on time, the L, was growing across the city and into its suburban peripheries.
L lines were being extended out past the edge to develop new suburban communities that would utilize the L to commute into downtown Chicago. One step further, electric interurban rail lines were running trains even further out into the countryside to connect suburban towns to central Chicago, all while competing with the existing steam railroads.
One such interurban, the North Shore Line, was in a conundrum. They were suffering from success, as their old route through the wealthy North Shore towns had become too developed, thus lowering speeds and increasing congestion. They wanted a new, high-speed bypass line that would speed up their Milwaukee to Chicago interurban service.
This is where the real story begins, when the North Shore Interurban worked with the CRT, predecessor to the CTA, to have an L line running from Howard to Dempster Street in Skokie, then called Niles Center, along this new bypass route.
The line, which creatively would be called the Niles Center Line, was built with forward thinking in mind.
The right-of-way along the line was wide enough to accommodate 4 tracks at stations. Stations were also designed with good circulation in mind and the idea that platforms could be extended easily beyond just 2-car trains.
All of this was done with the expectation that traffic on the line would grow, because, line go up. After construction was completed on 8 new stations, the line opened to the public in 1925.
Welcome to the opening of the new Niles Center Line. This will be the backbone of our new community along the line.
A few years later.
Where is everybody?
By the 1930s, the Niles Center Line was an abject failure. Ridership never fully materialized, and the area never saw the kind of development that was envisioned back in the 20s. The only things it served were empty plots of land in the village of Skokie, which was only 5,000 people in 1930. Suffice to say, by 1947, when the CTA took over with an axe to grind against speculative transit lines, the Niles Center Line was the first of many to go. With that, in March of 1948, the CTA finally killed the Niles Center Line.
The closing of the line was a big loss for the community of Skokie, which now after the war was seeing extreme growth, as those once empty plots of land were quickly turned into mid-century apartments and homes.
It remains a real shame that the CTA closed the line so soon, as fortunes would turn around within the next few decades. But thankfully, there was still another operator on the line.
The North Shore Interurban! Wait a minute, why is it in a museum? The North Shore Interurban, with their fancy Electroliner train sets, kept service to the area, but only at Dempster Street Station.
Side note, these are objectively the most attractive trains ever built. Well, second to the Cleveland Red Line, of course.
All other stops along the Niles Center branch were closed. And even the future for the North Shore wasn't that bright, with it abandoning service in 1963, only a decade and a half after the end of CTA service.
The CTA realized in the 1960s the potential need for rail service to Skokie, seeing as the town had blossomed to 60,000 people. In 1964, the CTA revealed this new vision with the brand new/old Skokie Swift. Wow! So much parking! The Skokie Swift was a radical departure from the other lines in the CTA system. For one, there were only 2 stations on the line, the first being Howard, with connections to the rest of the CTA system, and the second being Dempster-Skokie, with connections to a massive parking lot. Dempster-Skokie is also the first time the CTA opted not to duplicate station names on their system.
The idea was simple. People would drive their cars and park at Dempster Station, and then ride the quite speedy Skokie Swift to Howard, and then take the CTA to downtown from there. There's also a bus interchange if you wanted to take whatever the hell kind of bus routes that existed before Pace.
The concept proved wildly successful, so successful that it exceeded ridership expectations, a thing completely unheard of in our current times. It and other post-war transit systems,
Check out our Patco video,
was an inspiration to new systems being built in the United States. San Francisco, Washington, D.C., Atlanta, Miami, and Baltimore all built brand new metro systems that focused on speed and ease of access for suburban commuters into downtown.
The success of the Swift also inspired changes to further CTA expansions, with lines like the Orange focusing on a similar motto, though admittedly with slightly fewer parking lots and more focus on bus integration.
But the Skokie Swift, the line that had started it all, had remained in stasis for the last half of a century. Nothing really changed on the Swift, and its 2-car shuttle service continues to run same as it ever was, to this very day.
At the dawn of the 2000s, planning was yet again evolving in a different direction. People realized that this thing called climate change required that we transport people around in more sustainable modes of transportation like trains. Planning for transit networks slowly began to evolve, and so too did the Skokie Swift.
After the Skokie Swift was created, for the longest time it didn't actually serve downtown Skokie. In the 2000s, the city of Skokie planned and built a new station next to their downtown on Oakton Avenue, which they creatively named Oakton-Skokie. The station is located where one used to exist on the Niles Center branch.
Ironically, making the Skokie Swift slightly less swift has made access to downtown Skokie even swifter.
Also happening around this time, Evanston was studying a station at 3 possible sites, Dodge, Asbury, and Ridge. While nothing came of this, it presents a change in direction for how the Skokie Swift should function.
Now is a time where transit agencies are moving away from the park and ride oriented model of yesteryear, with agencies like WMATA pushing heavily for TOD across their network. TOD promotes usage of stations through putting more destinations at stops, and when well built, it promotes a car-free lifestyle, which is good for the planet.
This is something systems like the Chicago L used to get right, as they helped build the Chicago that we know and love today.
And sure, the area around the Yellow Line ain't exactly car-free living, but it could easily get there with some love.
Maybe we should add stations back at Asbury, Crawford, or Dodge.
Maybe we should extend the Swift north to Old Orchard Mall.
Maybe we should add back all the stations on the Niles Center branch.
And who knows, with this level of investment on the line, we can move beyond its status as a shuttle, extend the Red Line to help alleviate congestion at Howard.
As to starting this change, the CTA just needs to be committed to rethinking the Yellow and understand that it's a very underutilized asset in the broader CTA system. Perhaps even the answer to life, the universe, and everything.
And you may ask yourself,